Hey guys, it's Craig Campbell from Pastor Craig's Cards, and today we're looking at the glory of his times, and that would be Bob Boyd in this 1961 Topps card. And this is Bob's last card, and you can see it's very typical of the 1961s, off center, left to right, but and no hat either. 1961, seeing that many guys didn't have hats, but Bob Boyd, just a great story on him. And you look at the back of his card, and if you notice that birth date, October 1st of 1926. And, I don't know if you maybe have figured it out yet, but Bob played in the Negro Leagues and for the Memphis Red Sox. And we're going to get to that as we take a look at the story of Bob Boyd. His nickname was Rope, R-O-P-E, and this information comes from an interview that he had done in 2003. And Bob said he was born in 1925 in Potts Camp, Mississippi. And I bring that up because, as Bob said, it was only 60 years after the ending of the Civil War. Just 60 years after the Civil War had ended. And Bob's dad traveled and took his family to see baseball games on the weekends. And Bob is left-handed, and his dad saw to it that Bob was going to become a first baseman as a lefty. And Bobby spent 2 years in the Army as a quartermaster during World War II. And then in 1947, he signed with the Memphis Red Sox in the Negro Leagues for $175 a month. And that year, Bob led the league in hitting as he led the league in hitting, never hitting below 352 in the Negro Leagues, and he was a two-time All-Star as well. And he was the first player to be signed, the first Negro player to be signed by the White Sox when they bought his contract from the Memphis Red Sox for $15,000. Of course, Bob didn't get the money, but the owners of the Negro League team, the Memphis Red Sox, got that money. And he went out to Colorado, in Colorado Springs, and in his very first minor league at bat, Bob hit a home run. And he said this about going to the major leagues. He said, we just didn't believe that a black person would make it to the major leagues. We just didn't believe that would happen. He never thought that he would make it to the major leagues. And he knew Jackie Robinson had signed, and there were a lot of black players that were hopeful. He said, I just didn't believe that it would happen. And so there he was with the White Sox, and he roomed with Minnie Minoso while they barnstormed together in the South one year. And he said him and Minnie were roommates, and they had to stay at some black people's houses because the South was still very segregated. They couldn't stay with their teammates. They couldn't eat with their teammates. And but he said him and Minnie spent a lot of time together, and he really enjoyed that time. Now, again, this is from his own interview, from his words. He said, strangely, that he owes his major league career to Paul Richards, a manager. And Bobby said that Paul Richards was the most prejudiced person that he ever met in Major League Baseball. Now, Paul, he took over as manager of the Baltimore Orioles, and he remembered Bob Boyd, because Bob was a heck of a minor league player. And so when he had a chance, he drafted Bob in the Texas League draft, or out of the Texas League, in 1956. And so Bob, in 1957, had his breakout year. He got up to the major leagues, and he finished fourth in hitting with a .318 average. He became the first Oriole to hit over 300 for a season. In 1958, he followed it up with a .309 average for the year, and so he just was a really good hitter. But he was short. He was 5'9", but he was really good at first base, had a great glove, finished third in fielding percentage, but being short, he didn't have that long stretch, so they were a little bit worried that Bob was going to struggle as a first baseman. But he had a great glove, and he also had great speed. He was very fast. And then but the problem is he just didn't have a lot of power. He didn't hit for very many home runs, but that's where that nickname Rope comes into play, because one of the coaches cut a little piece of rope and said that's what Bob hits as ropes. They're line drives sometimes barely getting over 10 to 15 feet off the ground, but man, did he hit them hard. And so he had little power. He only hit 19 home runs in almost 2,000 games, but he had a heck of an average, hitting over 300 for 5 seasons. And then he got traded to the Kansas City A's, the Athletics, and he hit 229 in only 26 games with them. And then in 1962, he finished his career up with the Milwaukee Braves, hitting 244 in just 36 games. And then he went to the minor leagues, and then he retired. Now, Bob, his rookie card is a 1953 Topps. It's a beautiful card. And this is his last card, the 1961 Topps. And after retirement, he went to Wichita, played semi-pro ball for a while, and was very, very involved in the Negro League Museum in Kansas City. And in 1951, as a matter of fact, he was asked, and he gave his list of Negro League All-Stars. And as far as Bob was concerned, his All-Star team for the Negro Leagues was pitcher Don Newcomb, catcher Roy Campanella, Jackie Robinson at first, Ray Dandridge at second, Hank Thompson as a third baseman, Willie Wells Sr. as a shortstop, and then for his outfield he had Larry Doby, Willie Mays, and Sam Jethro. And it was interesting listening to Bob talk about Major League Ball, and he said, the toughest pitcher that he ever had to face, surprisingly, was Herb Score. And he said when Herb Score was right, when he was on his game, he said he was the toughest pitcher that he ever had to face. And again, it's not surprising, but I hear it over and over and over again when I look at these players that played in the 60s. And Bob Boyd said the best hitter he ever saw, ever, was Ted Williams. He said he was one time playing first base, and Williams hit the ball so hard, it hit the first base bag and broke the strap on it that held it to the ground. But he said Ted Williams was just an unbelievable hitter. Just the contact, he said, was just it was like a rifle. And he was just so majestic and just such a fluid hitter. Just a great player. And then he said that, the best player that he ever played against was Mickey Mantle. He thought Mickey was probably the best player that he ever played with. Or played against, I should say. And so Bob, just a great story. Came out of the Negro Leagues into Major League Baseball. And just very, very involved with the game. And he was a fast player. Boy, could he run. But he just, line drive hitter. And, he only hit 21 home runs for his whole career. But he was a solid batter, because in over 2,000 at-bats in the major leagues, 2,300 at-bats, he only striked out 114 times. I mean, Bob Boyd made contact. He was a hitter's hitter. And the Orioles, when they gave him a chance, boy, they really were happy with what they got. And so that's the story behind Bob Boyd. A little bit of a long video today, but I just really wanted to share some of the background on him. And I'm just really happy to have this card in my collection. I actually may pick up a few more of his cards. There's a beautiful 1953 Topps. It's just a nice card. And, Bob, he didn't die until 2004. So he did get an opportunity to kind of, make a little bit of money signing autographs. And there are some autograph cards out there of Bob Boyd. And a guy that played in the Negro Leagues and succeeded in the Major Leagues. And so I hope you like this video. And I just love digging up these stories about these guys. And Bob Boyd, truly, it was the glory of his time in the Major League Baseball. All right, guys, take care.